세울.
아프리카는 젊고 역동적이며 자원이 풍부합니다. 한국은 첨단 기술과 다양한 경험을 보유하고 있습니다. 서로의 장점을 잘 결합하여 지속 가능한 해법을 찾는다면 글로벌 도전과 위기를 우리는 함께 헤쳐나갈 수 있을 것입니다.
Welcome, everyone, to a very special edition of The Globalists. We are coming to you live on day 2 of Korea's first ever hosting of the Korea-Africa Summit. Representatives from 48 African countries are here to discuss various ways through which Korea and the African continent can build a stronger and more prosperous future. This includes talks about energy, healthcare, and empowering startups. On our show today, we are pleased to have 3 experts in these areas to talk about the significance of the summit and what must be done to realize the full potential of cooperation between Korea and Africa. So, from my left, we have Mr. Timothy Dickens, Chairman of the South African Chamber of Commerce in South Korea. Welcome.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks for having me this morning.
Thanks for coming here. And to his left, we have Dr. Hoon-sang, Chief Strategy Officer at the Right Foundation. Thank you for coming, Dr. Lee.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here today.
And on my right, we have Ms. Anna Ekeledo, Executive Director of AfriLabs Foundation. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you so much.
So I'll start off with you, Anna. You've been here a few days, but this is your first trip to Korea, I believe. So what have you been up to, and what has been the impression that you have in your first days here?
Yes, this is my first trip to Korea, and I've had such a pleasant experience so far. The highlight for me has been, you know, the collaboration we just signed, the partnership between AfriLabs, my organization, and the Korea-Africa Foundation.
Oh, congratulations.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, we're really excited about it because the partnership is driven towards really driving cooperation and collaboration between the Korean and the African startup ecosystem, right? And we plan to do this by just fostering knowledge exchange and, you know, collaboration between African startups and Korean startups to exchange knowledge. We also plan to do a lot of joint research, you know, across different sectors, you know, looking at technologies and innovations and around climate change and other sectors, and just looking to drive more engagement between the continents. I'm really excited about that.
That sounds. AfriLabs has about 450 almost.
Yes, almost 500 member
almost
hubs.
500. Wow.
Yes, these are all incubators, accelerators, creative spaces, all working to support tech startups and entrepreneurs build their businesses from the very early idea stage all up onto scale, in addition to facilitating investment to the startups to ensure they're just successful, basically.
Well, I mean, it looks like the start of a very exciting kind of relationship between.
Oh, it is. It is. We envision immense returns, so in terms of economic returns for both regions, in terms of the ideas, the technologies and innovations that develop through these startups, but also in terms of financial returns, right? Because we have startup investors on both sides, the Korean investors as well as the African investors who invest in these startups and everything and expect to have the sort of return. So we envision both the economic and financial, economic, social, and financial returns in a sustainable way, of course.
Wow.
Yeah.
It sounds like a very exciting aspect, but Tim, I mean, you're not a newcomer. You've been here for 11 years already.
Correct.
And so you've seen how Korea and African relations, not just South Africa relations, have developed over the years. During the summit, do you see this kind of, I don't know, an Africa-charged atmosphere? What do you think about the significance of the summit?
I mean, it's magnificent to be talking about Africa on a
everywhere,
platform, everywhere, around dinner tables, around conversations in coffee shops. Up until last week, I think it's been relatively quiet, but suddenly the mood and the vibe changed once the heads of state arrived, the delegations arrived. And from a personal perspective and also professionally from the chamber side, to be able to have this opportunity to share with Korea our opportunities, the partnerships, the collaboration components of the summit is fantastic. I think particularly over the last couple of years, there has been a significant change in the way that Africa has been viewed from a Korean perspective. I think that's been dependent on a lot of different geopolitical issues. I think COVID made a significant difference in terms of the change of focus on Africa for looking for alternative supply chains. On top of that, you had the trade relationship between the US and China. You had the Ukrainian war. So suddenly there was a different view on where do we look for other new partners in terms of securing our supply chain, whether that's energy, infrastructure, critical minerals. So I think it's been a sort of perfect storm from that perspective. On top of that, last year we had the Busan Expo where we were trying to bid for the 2050.
A lot of relationships and a lot of things going on between Korea and African countries.
Correct. So it's been a continuation of that, and now with the summit. And I must give credit to the administration. I think they made that commitment early on to say they would host this inaugural African. I mean, it's a very unique event. We've got 25 heads of state. That's never happened. It's probably one of the biggest delegations, and they followed through on that commitment. So from the Chamber's perspective, I think that's a first step in the right direction to keep these discussions.
Yeah, I think these kind of summits really concentrate a nation's focus on an area, and this time it's Africa, which I think is really needed at this time. Dr. Lee, I mean, you have another perspective from a Korean perspective. Africa's image for Koreans have not really been great for a long time. As Tim mentioned, Africa's been sort of on the back burner for a long time. Do you think this kind of summit is able to change that? And he brings up COVID. What are the effects of a post-COVID world on how Koreans view Africa?
So I think there had been some of a disconnect because probably coming from the geographic distance and unfamiliarity of the culture and many of the things. But I think in the highly connected world that we live right now, especially with the public health aspect, with the pandemic and infectious disease that really can affect a global community, I think now we are understanding that how we are interconnected together. And I think that also this Africa Summit is really a great opportunity to remind ourselves that we have shared value and shared interest to work together For one thing, African continent is actually one of the few continents which is actually having population growth with a large portion of young populations and also increasing portion of the middle-income populations, which actually can also provide itself as increasing size of public procurement market for pharmaceuticals. But also there are many of the problems that we can solve together. But I think it will be great opportunity for Korean industries and researchers and academic institutions to work with African counterparts so that we can also solve the problems in Africa together and also improve the public health of our African continents. And also another aspect is the efforts, joint efforts to prepare future pandemic together, because we do not know within our next 20 or 30 years or even next 10 years which kind of disease pandemic potential will come out from Asia or Africa. And I think it will be a really great opportunity for Africa and Korea to work together for the common shared common good, but also to really prepare global community to prepare for the future pandemic as well. While we can really work together to see the potential of Africa as a market as well.
Well, Dr. Lee points out a lot of future potentials and great ones that actually we can work together on. But you know, he talks about the very young population of Africa, and obviously in the startup market, that's sort of reflected in how active and vibrant that is. But there are many misconceptions of Africa that are still in many parts of the world, and I would think that you face some in Korea as well. Have you seen them, and how do you overcome such misconceptions?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Dr. Lee was absolutely right when talking about the youthful population. When you look at the African continent at the moment, 60% of the population is less than 25 years old. And then when you further drill into the startup and entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem, and you look at the unicorns, the billion-dollar valuated businesses, the startups that have come out over the past decade, they've been driven by the youth, largely. In terms of misconceptions, yes, with our work across the continent, but also interfacing with other regions and continents, I would say the biggest driver of the misconception is the lack of consolidated data, right? Data. So it's difficult for a lot of people to get data about the opportunities on the continent, or they're not sure who to, where to get the data, but also who to build the relationships with, because at the end of the day, no matter how much data you have as well, connecting with people, building trust, in building business collaborations or running investment is a very critical part of, doing business and development. So, and that's why for AfriLabs, we're very focused on just bridging that gap, right? So on one hand, the data gap in terms of knowing the information on ground. With our network across 54 African countries and over 200 African cities, we have people that we can literally, constantly provide data on what's happening across the startup ecosystem, across various sectors, but also in terms of providing that soft landing pad. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really excited about the collaboration with the Korea Africa Foundation, is that for startups that want to scale into the African continent and that want to access new markets or even understand it, build for it, innovate for it, and all that, we provide that critical infrastructure on ground to provide, the soft landing and the hand-holding per se in just navigating the regulatory environment, understanding the market, helping the startups work on their product market fit and adaptation and all of that. So that's that. I would say those two things,
Those are critical things.
Yes.
I think critical things. And despite the fact that we have not yet had that much, Tim, I mean, there are some, not just South African, but African countries, limited number that have done well in Korea, and maybe some of those Korean companies are doing well in Africa. What are some of those companies that maybe are a member of your chamber?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. And to be honest, historically, there hasn't been a huge amount of trade between Korea and Africa. I think if we look at the trade volumes of Korea at present, it's probably 1.5% with the whole of Africa. I mean, if we look at the biggest trading partner of Korea, which is China, that's probably 20% plus. If we're looking purely at the numbers in terms of consumers, currently Africa equates to China. And by 2050, we'll be up to 2.5 billion. So in terms of numbers, it doesn't make sense not to be involved in Africa. There's huge opportunity. So I think, yes, we haven't had a huge amount of activity, but I think it comes back to the point which Anna really touched on, which is the data availability and having the discussions about who the right partners are, what's happening on the continent, what projects there are. It's a lot of information. So when we're dealing with the conglomerates, for example, in Korea, a lot of it is they just don't know what projects are coming out, who the players are, what the financing options are. Yeah. And within Africa itself, we're talking about 54 jurisdictions, which are very unique, whether that's politically, financially, socially, the way of the companies. But the key point is within all of those jurisdictions, there are companies that want to work, they want to be successful, they are successful, and it's about finding the right matches. So I think that point of the data sharing and data availability is why this summit is of critical importance, because these discussions are had. Yesterday we had our business forum, we had the right people in the room who have in-depth knowledge. So I think it's fantastic.
Well, I mean, I'm sort of surprised it hasn't happened before, but I think it's better late than never. And I think you're right in pointing out that the right kind of environment really does, because it's an African continent. We're talking about a diverse, vibrant continent filled with diverse countries. And so there's a lot of help that needs to be done. So far, however, Dr. Lee, we're going to go with you. We have been focused on ODA, overseas direct assistance, development assistance, sorry.
Yes.
And so we're, a lot of assistance to the African continent has been sort of where Africa has sort of fit into the picture for a lot of Koreans. But has, Korea's ODA into Africa been effective? And have they done it the right way? What do you think, Dr. Lee?
So Korea's ODA in Africa had been growing in quite a fast pace. And it is quite a large portion of Korean government's global ODA programs. And especially in the healthcare program, there had been quite a number of amount of official development assistance to Africa in the area of maternal and child health, infectious disease, and health system strengthening, and others. And while it began from the building of a health center and hospital, providing equipment, and then it is now providing large-scale like vaccine and other support, and also doing strengthening of a primary healthcare system down to the communities, all the way up to supporting national healthcare insurance in Ghana and Ethiopia and other countries. But now I think we are coming into the stage where we are really exploring additional options. For example, in the foundation that I work in, the Y Foundations, we are trying to leverage Korea's capacity to contribute toward making vaccines, developing research and development of vaccine, therapeutic and diagnostics that really suits the needs of African context and needs. So that I think we are exploring the potential how Korea and Africa can work together, utilizing the vast capacity that are lying in Korea in the area of healthcare R&D, engineering, manufacturing capacity, so that we can work to solve the problem of Africa. But even beyond that, I think what we are also doing is trying to involve African researchers, universities, and also even African companies in terms of sharing the technology for manufacturing of vaccine and diagnostics and others, so that I think we are really coming into the sphere of mutual prosperity and really looking at the prospect of really targeting the future, commonly shared future that we can benefit together from.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. As our guests have told us, as the world's youngest continent, Africa has great growth potential, and there are many opportunities that have yet to be tapped between Korea and Africa. So we will explore what they are after this break. So let's go into some specifics. Now, Anna, I mean, we've seen in the video that Africa is a very young continent, as we've all pointed out, and you've had some talks. Where are some of the areas in which there's future potential between collaboration between the startups in Korea and your almost 500 labs that you have at AfriLabs?
Yeah, absolutely. One area of cooperation is in terms of access to markets, right? And for both sides. There is an interest in the Korean market in terms of African startups looking to scale their operations globally. And there's a potential for, Korea to provide, through the Korea-Africa Foundation, but also through other stakeholders here. I know there's a lot of government support towards that area to support African startups scale and provide innovative solutions that may not exist here yet. On the other hand, is also supporting Korean startup scale into the African market, right? It's a huge market, of course, quite diverse and all that, as Tim mentioned, the 54 countries, all with very unique regulatory environments and cultures and the likes. But then that's why the presence of the labs across the continent is quite important to support the Korean startup scale.
That's sort of a soft landing that they need.
Soft landing, exactly. But another area is investment, so I do know that there's an interest in investing in the African continent. Of course, we have the large industries, the energy and the critical minerals and infrastructure, but also in terms of startups, high growth, high potential startups, investments. We've had quite a number of successful returns in terms of startups that have set up, scaled, and exited, their investment over the past decade. So there's, that potential there, but also in terms of research, development, and innovation, right? Because now we're beginning to, on a global level, I mean in Africa, but also globally, look at the startup ecosystem as an avenue to identify, build on potential solutions that can basically revolutionize industries. One of the successful case studies, for example, on the continent is a Tunisian startup that used AI, artificial intelligence, in the healthcare sector, and they were acquired by a larger European health company, right? And right now they're doing great work on the continent as well. So that's an example of how the startup ecosystem can match industry, right? And of course, with the interest by Korea to identify innovative solutions across, healthcare, mobility, agriculture for sustainable food technology and the likes, and other sectors, there's definitely that potential for cooperation.
It sounds like it has wonderful potential for especially the high-tech AI, future-oriented, as we're working together with technology of strengths of both countries to address issues.
Exactly, but also looking at the cultural exchange. We talk a lot about technology and the likes, which is applicable across various sectors, including, the creative sectors. And right now there's a Korean wave, globally.
Definitely, yes.
And in Africa, the vast youthful population are really excited about it. So when you look at K-pop, K-dramas, and other, Korean cultures, there's that keen interest. So it's really exciting to also be involved in conversations around just forging collaborations between the K-pop industry, the K-drama industry, and also foster cultural exchanges between Africa and Korea. And of course, Africa as well has a vast culture, very rich cultural
there's that
industry as well.
From a younger generation, the energy that comes from the culture exchanges is amazing.
It's amazing, and we envision a lot of investments going into the.
There's a lot of potential there too. I agree with you wholly. Tim, the other area is a different kind of energy, but energy on this area. Now you have had a lot of talks between Korea and African country and African companies about energy area. Talk about what kind of developments have been are in the works in this sector.
Sure, I think you've touched on probably, from my perspective, one of the most important parts, because without energy, without the infrastructure, we can't facilitate the medical side, we can't facilitate education. So I think for our Chamber's perspective, we focus on energy infrastructure and critical minerals, because that's the building block to then develop the rest of the economy. So yesterday at our forum, we covered those in detail, and some very interesting points and discussions came out of that. So one of them is, I think there's a gap in technology on the continent. So we have the manpower, we just don't have the technology. So that's human technology and also the physical technology for technology transfer. So I think that's one part where Korea really has fantastic ability in terms of their company, their stable of companies across the energy sector is fantastic from that perspective. So I think that's great. The other important part was the interconnectivity between these sectors. So traditionally we'd say infra, energy and critical minerals were separate pieces. But now we have to view the chessboard as a whole. And with decarbonization, which is the big ESG drive, particularly Korea also has very strict decarbonization targets by 2050, as do most countries. Critical minerals are a very important part in EV batteries, in the magnets that go into your phones and TVs.
Yes, all the tech equipment.
So in terms of that, now you start seeing the interconnectivity. But on top of that, if, for example, hydrogen, which is a big discussion point from the energy part as well, green hydrogen in particular, which is produced through the clean energy, we need to transport that from Africa to Korea, for example, because Korea is very dependent on energy importation. So now you start seeing that these are all interconnected. So the discussions are, as you mentioned, untapped, and I 100% agree. There are so many untapped areas.
Yeah. But a country like China, for example, has already tapped very much into the continent, and Korea's not at that level. How do you think Korea is able to catch up, especially in the area of critical minerals that has been brought up a number of times before and during the summit? What are ways that Korea can really step up its game?
That's a great point. And it's true that China has been quite active on the continent, but there's still so much that's untapped. One of the issues, I think, from the critical mineral side in particular is, as you mentioned, Korea is very dependent on China, particularly for the processed part of it, which then goes into the goods and so for manufacturing. So I think when we're looking at that value chain, we need to look at Africa, but it takes a bit of upfront investment. It's going to take a bit of time. We need to produce the facilities to extract, then manufacture. And I think earlier, Anna and I were discussing to say, in terms of the value chain, we want to keep that on the continent. So we want to have the manufacturing for the end sort of downstream. So I think from that perspective, there is opportunity. I think Korea needs to look at the long-term partnership and not just on a short-term basis. But the playing field is open. We want to play.
Yep. Well, it's wonderful. But Dr. Lee, I mean, some of the people that are playing are not just government, but you talked about the private aspect of ODA and the healthcare industry. What is that kind of collaboration going to look like?
So I think there are some of the aspects that that can be played by private sectors and also non-governmental sector in terms of research institution and others. So currently in our foundation's work, lately we had been receiving grants from many of the universities in African continent. Namely, right now, University of Cape Town is indeed undertaking a project, R&D project funded by us for developing new generation of high-impact malaria drug that are really suitable for the continent. And also there are quite a number of institutions, NGOs, and even the government bodies from Malawi, Mozambique, and Nigeria and Uganda who are undertaking digital health solution researches funded by us. And some of them are actually potentially looking at the prospect of using AI for tuberculosis screening and others as well. And also, there had been some of the interest from a vaccine manufacturing company in South Africa and others, and some of the diagnostic company in Nigeria. We are expecting that some of those companies will be applying for Right Foundation's grants because we can fund the technology transfer if there is any company, Korean company, who are willing. So I think it is really great to see the prospect that with the Korean technology and capacity and with the very agile energy and a lot of passion of African industry partners. I think if they work together, there is best market in Africa, which is even growing now. So I think there are many of the potential and possibilities that we can work together.
Definitely a more sustainable future in the making. So the summit has provided an important impetus, but the real value will be in the follow-up measures. Let's explore what those would be after the break. So Anna, I understand that you're heading into another youth startup session in the afternoon. What will your advice be? I mean, for these young people who want to, tap into the potential of Korea-Africa relationships.
Yes, I would say engage.
Engage.
That's the first approach. I mean, with again, one of the reasons I'm super excited about my time here in Korea is the partnership with the Korea Africa Foundation, and as part of our collaboration is just providing these platforms, and opportunities on both the African continent and in Korea for young people, that have these great ideas that want to build their businesses to engage. And when I say engage, I look at it from a multi-stakeholder perspective, and this brings together the conversation we had earlier on. Dr. Lee mentioned really quite well the importance of research and the role of the academia in basically building these innovations. And it sort of reminds me of a tour I took in Rwanda a couple of weeks ago in this Unipod. So it's part of this bigger, this initiative Timbuktu I'm part of, that has set up university-based innovation labs, for young people who have ideas to go in and build their ideas, and they have the equipment, they have the support system and all of that, and then they integrate that to their research and development. And I met this really interesting a startup team that are actually building a mining technology. So again, connecting it with industry, innovation to, industry supported by further research and development and academia. So that is as a result of an engagement process. So by the time you tie the technology, transfer and expertise from the Korean market, and then you connect it with the youth, connect it with the innovation ecosystem and the support system on ground with the incubators and accelerators, both in Korea and the African continent, but also drive investments, development finance and catalytic funding, but also private investors. These are opportunities for startups to engage and take advantage of the opportunity. So I would say the call to action is, on one hand, for the young people and the innovators to engage in whatever environment you're in, whether it's the academic environment or connected to hubs, but also on the other hand, from the other stakeholders to support the youth. I would say that would be a strong call to action. Very key is policymakers. Later today I'm gonna be on a panel that's just talking about enabling policies to ensure innovation thrives. And here I've had an interesting time. Yesterday I was at Tippy Town, and just learning about the Korean policies that are enabling for startups to thrive, from the government assistance in terms of funds to the policies that encourage investors as well to invest in startups. These are some of the conversations and advocacy we also do on the African continent to ensure that it's easier for startups to set up their businesses, to grow, to scale, and also attractive for investors to invest in startups as well. So that's another key point from I expect to come out, and I would, speak about at the summit today.
Well, I think that those are wonderful messages. That's engage, connect, support.
Support.
There you go.
Exactly.
So, I mean, all three are need to be done. I mean, Anna's talked about this. I mean, Dr. Lee, I mean, it's not just healthcare, but in, other areas in which the healthcare industry investments, future-oriented, can be part of Korea and Africa's future. Which areas do you see as holding some of the potential? And are there some examples you can tell us about what those kind of areas and what is happening?
So I think we do not have to be limited to just healthcare only, but I think there is convergence of capacity from healthcare and ICT and AI capacity. And I think I would be really interested in maybe our foundation supporting the Tunisian startups
who
are making the AI-based diagnostic tool. And there are so much potential that AI is bringing and digital health can take a role in the field. So, and I think that really looms from maybe the capacity that is increasing in Africa in the area of information, communication technology, and IT areas. And also other aspect is there are some additional aspects that we can explore together. You talked about the regulatory environments. That is really important. Right now in Rwanda, the African Medical Agency, which is Africa continent-wide regulatory body, which is really crucial in terms of rolling out any kind of like medical or pharmaceutical product to the continent. And I think there can be quite of efforts that we can work together in terms of regulatory harmonizations so that some of the good innovation that can really roll out to the continent in a more accelerated manners. And so there are, I think, many of the aspects that we can work together. Also, in terms of strengthening the healthcare in the industry aspect, right now EDCF, the Korean government loan body, a part of the Korean Exim Bank, is making a loan to Kenyan vaccine manufacturing facilities. And also Korea, this control agency is having an MOU with Africa CDC. So I think there are really multifaceted approach that Korea and many African countries and the continental level can work together.
I think you point out a number of areas, and the advantage of Korea, not just in the technology, but in its experience of the development process in itself, is I think something that the African continent, with sharing with the African continent, is an important thing. Jim, do you see that? I mean, what kind of you talked about this summit coming out of all the talks that we had last year between Korea and African countries about the Busan Expo, but what about the forthcoming of after the summit? Well, what would the follow-ups that you're looking for would be?
So follow-ups are the key point, and I think it's critical that we make sure that we have a definitive guideline, a definitive end goal on project base, whether it's partnerships, whether you're looking at long-term relationships, because as you said, what happens after the summit? What we do find is you need key driving people, whether that's in government from policy making to have consistent policies in terms of this is our guideline that we want to follow with these relationships. I think within private sector, companies also need to make a definitive decision to say, yes, we are very active, we're going to follow for the next 20, 30 years in terms of following our Africa relationship. So I think those follow-ups are critical. By way of example, the Chamber, we're working with KITA, for example, to do MOUs with SADC region, the SADC Business Council, with the AU Business Council, to have delegations go out so that we can continue this energy that's been built up through the summit. But without those follow-ups, I think we get back to square one and we talk about potential again for the next 10 years, which will be very frustrating.
Yeah.
So
well, we don't want to do that, Anna.
We don't.
So, Anna, what are you thinking of as specific follow-ups that you'd like to continue after the summit?
Yes, so I always believe in action. I believe talk and then move into action, and then improve along the way, right? So one of the key follow-ups, which I'm quite excited about, is every year, the AfriLabs, community and other stakeholders and partners from around the world come together, for our AfriLabs annual gathering.
At the end of the year.
At the end of the year,
yes.
exactly. So this year we'll be in Cape Town, South Africa. Everybody's excited about it.
You can all go together.
We can all go together, exactly. So I invite you all, And so we're currently having a conversation with the Korea Africa Foundation to actually plan a delegation of Korean startups to come to Africa during the summit and just create those opportunities for knowledge exchange already and, exposing them to the opportunities in the African continent. But even going further into running concrete projects, whether it's research projects, startup and cultural exchanges, and activities like that, and not just with the foundation, but also with other Korean agencies. I'm really excited about just engaging with Dr. Lee here and just looking at opportunities for that knowledge transfer, support of the innovative startups in the healthcare sector, and also other possibilities. Earlier I spoke about the mining tech company, and there's also a mining tech hub that will be set up in Zambia, by the way, hosted by the Zambian government. Exactly. So there's a lot of exciting things. Again, that's driven by Timbuktu. So there's a lot of exciting things happening on the African continent that provide concrete opportunities for direct engagement, whether it's funding, investment, research, knowledge exchange, and the likes. And we plan to record some success stories in terms of actual follow-up this year and beyond. And
That's very exciting.
Yes.
Dr. Lee, besides the fact that we've been invited to Cape Town at the end of the year, what about some specifics that you would like to see coming out of the summit?
So I think there are ways that we can explore more of the partnership and collaboration between Korean biopharmaceutical industries and African counterparts in the academia and research institution. But I would like to see more of the African manufacturers and vaccine pharmaceutical diagnostic developer to take a part in the opportunities. But also, I think there will be which can be funded by Right Foundations, but also there will be opportunity at the end, the later part of this year, there will be World Bio Summit, which will be organized by Ministry of Health of Korea, which is one of the biggest biopharma summit events that is organized by Korean governments. Besides that, actually, I will be in South Africa in December to participate in the Africa Society of Laboratory Medicine to take a part in discussion for diagnostic capacity in Africa. And many of such dialogue and events that we can work together. Besides, actually, there is very important initiative for Africa Vaccine Manufacturing or Accelerator Initiative by Gavi, and also there is another effort by Africa CDC as well to establish vaccine manufacturing capacity in Africa. So I think it will be really important to carry on all this dialogue for the future concrete actionable items.
Oh, it's wonderful to hear all these concrete actionable items. But like the African saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Korea and the African continent are joining forces in order to carry their relationship far and into a prosperous future. We hope the summit will just be the starting point of this exciting journey. Thank you, Anna, Timothy, Dr. Lee, for joining us today and giving us your valuable insights.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next week, I will be back with another globalist who is putting Korea on the map. So, Son Ji-ae out.